Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking episode 12 of season 2 of Arrow called Tremors. Tragically, this has nothing to do with the graboid critters from those Tremors movies, of which I am unnecessarily fond of, especially the first one. But in any case, this is still a really good episode. This is another one where they don't pull any punches. A lot of stuff gets shaken up. A lot of things happen. And there's just a lot of moments that make you go, ooh, with fanish glee. And oh, yes. I see stuff like this and I think, we really are watching the best live action superhero show ever. And with the Flash coming and the other shows coming from the DC Comics that are apparently in the works coming down the line, folks, I said it before, I'll say it again. It's a great time to be a comics fan. It really is. This day and age is what, geeky people such as myself dreamed the world would be like back in the 90s. But anyway, I'm getting off on unrelated matters. Let's get right into this episode. And this episode really starts off quite strongly with the Armitage fellow smuggling those blades into the prison for Bronze Tiger. And I gotta say, that sequence where he just starts pulling those out of his skin, I don't know how in the world that guy pulled that off. He must have been doped up to the gills on painkillers or something. But I was just, whoa, this feels like something from a much more hardcore story than what we usually get with Arrow. And this is a show where the lead character, according to the tallies by the fans, has killed over 50 people personally. Oh boy. But anyway, that was a really intense scene, which was followed up by what has to be the stupidest guard that I have seen in a long time. He doesn't call for backup or anything. He just sort of immediately rushes in there and with his back to a prisoner who isn't shackled or anything. I mean, just the absolute lack of common sense on this guy's part. So of course he becomes the first of 10 people that Bronze Tiger kills on his way of busting out of Iron Heights. Now, I really am happy about this episode in terms of Bronze Tiger. Michael Jai White, I think, kind of got, story-wise, the short end of the stick last time he was around. Here, Bronze Tiger comes back and makes a pretty good showing of it. He is presented as someone who is very dangerous, very formidable, and I have a feeling, of course, that we're going to want... basically, this is the one that gives him some real cred. Now, granted, at the end of the day, he does lose to Roy, but on the other hand, Bronze Tiger is a regular person, albeit an exceptional martial artist, fighting a guy with superhuman strength and durability, so it's not kind of that surprising that he manages to, get his butt kicked. But anyway, so some real props to Michael Jai White for really bringing the danger and the menace to this character. Bronze Tiger is not a character that I'm terribly familiar with from the comics. It's just, as I understand it, he's basically considered up there in terms of martial artists in the DC universe, but he's not near the top 10. Maybe he's somewhere in the top 20. But, all of that's a matter of subjective opinion. Anyway, moving on to talk about the other characters. This episode... let's talk about Laurel this time around. And this episode is basically Laurel's downward spiral just continues and accelerates. Not to mention, Laurel acts like an enormous jerk a lot of the time. Especially to her father. Laurel, you stole from the guy, and... yeah, granted, she does have reason to be upset when that he didn't believe her. But, he has pretty good reasons not to believe what Laurel is saying there. And I just love that Laurel really just brushes off this whole, you were arrested for, possession of stolen pills. and just kind of walks, like, goes around like she can just kind of brush that off as a minor misunderstanding. Now, it was certainly nice to see her old friend Joanna back again, a nice bit of continuity there, and it sort of offers Laurel a positive outcome, presuming that they can, kind of figure out some way to not have not for everything to completely collapse down around her head. But in any case, Laurel does herself absolutely no favors. And it is sort of sad that becoming an unlikable jerk is really perhaps the most interesting thing. Unlikable jerk with a descent into alcoholism, I should say, and drug abuse. Yeah, this episode more than makes up for the, Laurel seems to be turning into an addict, but is not showing any signs of it thing that some people were complaining about from a few episodes ago. Anyway, but yeah, it is a little sad that this is probably the most interesting thing that Laurel as a character has done so far. And of course, I knew that when Oliver picked up the phone to call somebody that he was calling Sarah. And this, of course, sets up a whole big can of worms. Now, Laurel knows that Sarah is alive, at least once she sobers up a little bit. And it's probably inevitable that Sarah's going to say, Dad knows that I'm alive. And, well, again, just the possibilities of, okay, well, where do things go from here? Now, granted, having her sister turn up alive is an enormous positive. It finally brings something genuinely good to Laurel's life. And, but of course it also puts her even more in the path of the League of Assassins. So, you don't get something for nothing, eh? I had an interesting conversation with one of my viewers, and they mentioned, they basically said to me, at this point I really can't see as Laurel ever becoming Black Canary. And I kind of agree with this. It just seems such an enormous leap for Laurel to go from where she is now to being, one of the best martial artists in the DC universe, someone who is considered pretty much on par with Batman. It really just makes more sense for Sarah to stay as Black Canary and Laurel to carve out some other destiny, which I think would be a very bold and interesting move. I think it'd be kind of fun if she were to end up becoming Manhunter or something like that. But I don't know what kind of odds I would place on that. But anyway, it certainly is going to be interesting to see what happens when Laurel is drawn inevitably, just through her association with her sister, into the circles of the League of Assassins. So cool stuff there. But yeah. Also, some real points to Quentin. He really is trying to do his best to help Laurel here. And you have to figure he probably does feel a little bit guilty after telling her, I don't believe you, last episode. Which, of course, why, for her own benefit, he tricks her into going to that AA meeting. But, yeah. Anyway, let's go on. Okay, first of all, also I want to say this episode, seeing that picture of Tommy at Malcolm Merlin's house. Oh, that's a heartbreaker. And again, just seeing the Markov device come back, and again, Markovia is mentioned. Again, kind of really makes me wonder if they aren't going to be bringing back, something I talked about earlier with, maybe this whole earthquake machine is something that the League of Assassins came up with, because, earthquake machines and the ability to destroy and kill thousands upon thousands of people, totally in line with Ra's al Ghul's line of thinking. But again, this is just an idea I'm kind of floating out there. So so let's kind of get right back into things. Let's see. Oh yeah, one other little detail in this episode that I want to talk about so that I don't forget it. Towards the end, when Oliver gets the watch off the buyer that Bronze Tiger was going for, he gives it to Felicity, and it's like, yeah, and she says, like, oh, the guy's fingerprints are going to be on this. You notice that Oliver doesn't even have this in, like, a sandwich bag or anything. He just hands it to her so that Felicity can get her fingerprints on it as well. And I think he actually didn't have his gloves on at the time, too, if I remember correctly. So that means his fingerprints are on it. Oliver, if you want to preserve fingerprint evidence, you kind of probably want to use a baggie for that. I mean, well, a lot of what they do on that show is completely BS, but at least CSI gets that much right. I mean, CSI was on the air when you were stranded on that island. It's on, like, what, season 14 now? Okay? Come on, Oliver. Anyway, speaking of Felicity, I did get a big kick out of her, like, oh, well, I call it Team Arrow sometimes thing. And what's really nice is the reaction that Roy had there, because Roy has met Felicity. It was not on the show. They did this 5-minute thing called Blood Rush that I think was shorts that they released on the internet, and you can find them on YouTube if you poke around. And it was in conjunction with some little advertising campaign, but it was basically like a little, in 1-minute segments, this little 5 or 6-minute adventure with Roy having to, well, basically, long story short, it involves Roy and Felicity meeting for the first time. So Roy knows that who Felicity is when he walks into the Arrow lair. He knows that's Oliver Queen's secretary. So yeah, cool stuff there. And yeah, let's kind of just segue into Roy there. So here we see Roy not reacting terribly well to Oliver's attempts to train him. And you know, I do like that Oliver just goes for what Shadow did for him. And of course it makes perfect sense for him to do that. But you have to figure that Roy might probably respond a little bit better to the way Slade did with Oliver. But here's the thing. Slade was about putting some fighting spirit, some aggression in Oliver. You know, Oliver was not a fighter. What Shadow did was, of course, help him to be, you know, better at taking care of himself, but you know, she really helps him focus, and that's what Roy needs here. He needs to focus, to calm himself. Oliver even says, anger is energy. Roy's like a fire hose of anger. He's just spraying it out everywhere, and unsurprisingly, that's creating a big mess. But you know, here, and I love how Oliver sums it up at the end. The vigilante, the Arrow, is not somebody that could get through to Roy. But Oliver Queen, someone that Roy knows cares deeply about the woman he loves, that gets through to Roy. And that's really well done. I love that scene, that interaction. And of course, this is just an inevitability of the lore here. Roy is destined to be basically Oliver's sidekick and to eventually become a great hero in his own right. So here we see Roy taking that big step onto that path. You know, him agreeing to take a little bit of training from the vigilante is one thing, but here, fully being brought into the great secret. Okay, this is where Roy's path to becoming Red Arrow. You know, it's not Thea whose nickname is Speedy. I'm just going to say that his destiny is Red Arrow. This is where it really starts. And speaking of Thea, they've really done much better with Thea this season. Now, watching like this episode where we see her, you know, trying to help Laurel. First of all, I'm a little annoyed with Thea that she didn't reprimand the bartender for giving alcohol to somebody who was obviously way past their limit. I'm pretty sure there are laws against that sort of thing, or at least that any reputable nightclub is going to have a "okay, you've had enough" kind of rule in place. But whatever. And the only real kind of gripe I had about this scene is it got me thinking how at the very beginning of the series they kind of had some stuff with Thea sort of being a little bit on the borderline of going into being an addict. Of course, there was a time when she got busted for having crashed her car while high on vertigo, and this seemed like a real opportunity for Laurel to basically just kind of throw that back in Thea's face, and I was a little disappointed that they didn't go there. But yeah, you know, the worst aspects of characters like Oliver and Thea and Tommy that they tried to play with in the very early episodes, those did tend to fade away pretty quick. After all, the whole thing where Quentin sort of implied that Tommy might have slipped some of his date rape drugs. was mentioned and then never brought up again, even though that does seem like the sort of thing that would be important. But then again, Quentin was probably just being a dick at the time, so... Anyway, what I like about Thea is that, one, she's acts very mature, very responsible in the whole dealing with Laurel situation, and I just love Stephen Amell's just palpable sense of profound disappointment in Laurel. Now, granted, some of that probably stems from seeing a lot of his old self in Laurel. You know, when Oliver was the irresponsible playboy, it was Laurel who was the reasonable and mature person in their relationship. And now it's a complete 180. And you have to think the irony of that is probably not lost on him. But think about his pain. Think about the pain of seeing Laurel, the strong, intelligent, responsible woman, and here she is in front of him, this ridiculous drunk. Okay. But anyway, getting back to Thea. I also liked this episode that was really Thea that sort of spurred Moira to take Walter's offer seriously. Now, it's interesting in the comics that there was actually a while where Oliver ran and won the job of mayor of Star City, Starling City's counterpart in the comics. So it was his trying to be on balance of being the mayor of Star City and being the vigilante who protects it at the same time. And of course, it all went to hell eventually. But it certainly is an interesting idea to take Moira and have her go down that road. And, well, Walter even puts it great well that, you know, people love a redemption story, and he rattles off several examples. You know, he is true. I mean, if you're familiar from the 90s of Washington, D.C. Mayor Marion Barry, who was caught on video smoking crack, and of course would later go on to be reelected mayor of Washington, D.C. There's what's that fellow up in Canada, Rob Ford, who, well, I suppose that's probably not the best example. But yes, there are many, many examples of people who have publicly and unquestionably been guilty of really bad stuff who went on to be elected to high office. So it is not unreasonable to think that this really could happen with Moira. And of course, this opens up many possibilities. You know, what happens if the mayor decides, uh-oh, this vigilante's got to go? And of course, one, this gives Moira something genuinely really, really interesting to do. She's sort of been a little bit in limbo the last several episodes. Here, Moira is once again a big, important player in the city. What is happening with her is important to the show. It's important to her family. And this is great because Moira is a fantastic character. I keep thinking of last season where Oliver says to her, "Moira Queen, you have failed this city," and oh, how cool was that? Now here, well, you have to think, Moira Queen, despite her good reasons for doing what she did, in her mind, you know, she is responsible to some degree for the deaths of over 600 people. She did fail Starling City, whatever her reasons, whatever her motivations. And now she's been given a chance to make up for it. Now, it seems, basically the numbers that Walter throws out are that something like, what, 47% of the people in the city are actually on Moira's side? That seems pretty in contrast to what we were seeing in the early part of this season. Now, granted, I suppose you could just say that, you know, the wounds have healed a little bit, but yeah, this seems just a little too convenient for my taste. If Moira had a little bit more spotlight, if we'd been seeing things happening that might cast her in a more sympathetic light or give the people of the city reason to think good things about her, then I could see, you know, maybe this works. But under the current circumstances, this kind of this kind of reeks of BS, but whatever. People can never figure. A pair of glasses is enough to make people not realize that Clark Kent is Superman. So, hey, let's just kind of go with it, right? Let me see here. Wow, my handwriting is terrible. Yeah. The island. We can't forget to go talk about the island. First of all, we see more of Oliver becoming a little bit more of a badass here. He lies to Slade's face, but he does so in a really awesome way. And he kind of helps bring Slade down a little bit. I was a little disappointed that Oliver didn't mention to Slade, "Hey, Slade, you know that there are people locked up on that boat. Shouldn't we try to rescue them? Isn't that what Shadow would have wanted us to do?" You'd think that would be the sort of thing that might get through him, and I'm really disappointed that Oliver didn't try that tactic. But, he can't have everything. What we do have is, of course, another appearance by Amanda Waller at the end of this episode. And that scene where she starts talking to Bronze Tiger, and she goes like, "Yeah, I want you for my team." And there's that pause, and I'm just sitting there thinking, say it. And then she goes, "Actually, it's really more of a squad." I'm like, yes! She said the magic word. We are unquestionably getting Suicide Squad. Oh, I'm not even that big of a Suicide Squad fan, but this is gonna be good. So we got Bronze Tiger, China White still in jail. Shrapnel has just been busted. I know of one other villain coming down the pipe this season who would be a really great addition to the Suicide Squad. And then we know that Amanda knows that Oliver is Green Arrow, so she's got all the blackmail material that she could ever want on him. She knows that Diggs involved too. And, we also have Black Canary running around, so there's another person who could possibly end up on Suicide Squad. And, yeah. And thinking about what I've read about the previews for the information that's been released on the not spoilers. I don't read spoilers. I read things like casting announcements and the official descriptions of episodes that they give out to like TV Guide and stuff. Those I do read. So I know of one other person who's going to be coming into the mix who would be a really, really great choice to stick on Suicide Squad just for the sheer sparks that they would cause with the other characters. Oh, guys, I don't think this season has even started to get crazy. And let's not forget, Malcolm Merlyn is still out there. The League of Assassins are still out there. Suicide Squad versus the League of Assassins. Could it be? Oh, this is such a good show. I'm loving it. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. people, writers, please, for the love of God, be taking notes. I enjoy your show a great deal, but this is how you do it. Oh, folks, it's such a good time to be a fan. It really, really is. Anyway, just one more glance over my notes. Nope, that covers everything that I had to say this episode. Again, loving it. So much cool stuff. And the insanity, I am convinced, has only just begun. We've got Suicide Squad coming down the line. We know that Oliver inevitably has to fight Deathstroke. Oh, it's so good. Anyway, guys, that's all I got for you this time. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And, of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Who's Your Jedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.